G'day YouTube, first dog on the moon, Sunday 26th of April.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here in the grand ballroom of the Bjorn Lomborg Climate Consensus Centre in downtown Western Australia. It's an honour to welcome you to the first ever Coolies, the annual Climate Denialist Awards. Tonight will be a dazzling spectacular, for it's the Global Warming Skeptics Night of Nights. So, without further ado, I'd like to ask everyone to please be upstanding for the International Climate Skeptic Anthem, sung by Mr. Lomborg himself. Take it away, maestro. And a big thanks to the Ian Plimer Big Band. Later in the show, we'll have Greg Hunt and the boys from Direct Action performing for you. Now, just before we get to the first award, we'd like to thank our sponsor, the federal government. We really appreciate that in these difficult times when it's been necessary to take so much money out of so many important areas of science, so many so-called scientists have lost their jobs, Tony Abbott's able to find enough taxpayer dollars, 4 million of them, to fund our important science-flavoured research here at the Consensus Centre into how we don't have to do anything about climate change, because of course climate change is real, but carbon is an invisible gas and nature's fertiliser, and we all know shit happens. Our first award this evening is the most successful public performance category. It's the Tony Abbott Climate Change is Crap Award for dogged persistence in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. And the nominees are Bernadette Frimpley, who made over 15,000 calls to talkback radio shows this year alone; Clarence Spin, who ruined his family Christmas by getting in a drunken argument and yelling, "Stick your Arctic sea ice up your cloaca," at his 92-year-old auntie; and That's Not Anthropogenic Warming, This Is Anthropogenic Warming, a performance by the grade 6s at the Lord Monckton School for the Reality Adverse. The envelope, please. And the coolie goes to Bernadette Frimpley. Bernadette wasn't able to be here this evening to collect her award as she's currently busy on the internet commenting as 52 different people on various popular news websites. So here to collect the award on her behalf is Tim Blair's pet pig Simon. Thanks, Simon. The next coolie is the Andrew Bolt Things I'd Like to Say If Only I Had a Public Outlet Award for excellence in cherry picking, data selection and just ignoring the bits you don't like. The nominees are Margaret Foppington for Jet Fuel Doesn't Burn Hot Enough to Melt Steel Beams, Arnold Poffergy for Chemtrails and Gluten, Are We Being Over-Fluoridated by the One World Green Illuminati Government? And finally, the Institute for Public Affairs for Ha Ha Ha, they're spending $4 million on a climate skeptic think tank and there's nothing you can do about it. The envelope, please. And the coolie goes to the IPA, because it was on their wish list. Unfortunately, the IPA couldn't be here this evening as they're preparing their float for the Benson and Hedges Freedom of Speech Parade and Fun Run. The theme they're going with is Butt Out 18C. Collecting the award on their behalf is Federal Education Minister Christopher Pyne. Get off the stage, Simon. You've already got yours. Congratulations, Minister. Well, it's time for a word from our sponsor. We'll be right back after this brief 17-year pause.
Thanks, dog. Coming up to 10 o'clock. That means it's it.
Well, that was short and sweet. Pretty good, though. I really couldn't believe my ears when the radio said that the government was giving $4.1 million to a bloke called Bjorn Lomborg, who is I think he's a Norwegian, and he's got some official academic qualification as an environmentalist, but he just decided that he could get paid so much more if he could work on the side of the forces of evil. I mean, fossil fuel extraction industries. So all I can say is he sounds a bit like one of those old jokes justifying the practice of abortion. You know, what's the best argument to justify abortion? Still Bjorn Lomborg. But anyway, ANZAC Day, ANZAC Day, ANZAC Day, ANZAC Day, Brand Zac Day. That's what it's become, Brand Zac Day. 1914 to 1918 was when World War I actually happened, and between 2014 and 2018, the Australian government has committed to spend $320 million glorifying and celebrating the centenary of the First World War. $320 million. As we've been leading up to the 100th anniversary of Australia's invasion of Turkey, whereas a Gallipoli veteran put me straight back in about 1980, he said, we were put in at the wrong time, like about a week after the obsolete British battleships sunk themselves on Turkish mines, failing to force the Dardanelles Strait. So we had no element of surprise. We were put on there with not enough ammunition, inappropriate weapons, virtually no medical supplies or casualty evacuation services, not enough water. And the idiot who thought it up was Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty, or First Sea Lord, whatever they call it. He was the one who was obsessed by it. It was his navy who put the Australian forces and the New Zealand forces about 1.5 miles, 2 miles up the beach in the wrong place, so that instead of walking over a flat sandy beach with a few gentle sandhills and then miles of open countryside on the other side of that, oh shit no, he put them on a rocky shingle hard up against a cliff, which led to a spur made of lots and lots of folded ridges and gullies, so they could spend 9 months running uphill into machine gun fire and hand grenades with artillery over the top and essentially getting nowhere. And it was Winston Churchill who kept sending reinforcements because he didn't want to let go of his daydream. The ANZAC veterans, the Gallipoli veterans that I nursed, they hated Winston Churchill. They hated the idea of an annual glorification of a fuck-up. They said that after the First World War, half the people who survived, and let's bear in mind Australia had almost 5 million people at the start of the First World War, 60,000 of them volunteered to be shot and killed, and they were shot and killed. 120,000, rough numbers these, volunteered to be wounded, shot and wounded, and they were, and about 200,000 more volunteered to be head-fucked by the experience. But out of the people who were shot and wounded or only head-fucked, out of them, half of them refused to ever join the Return Services League because they reckon they were a bunch of nationalistic, patriotic wannabes and wankers. And, you know, well, I grew up in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and I remember the loudest mouth in the RSL was a bloke called Bruce Ruxton. He was the president and the head of the RSL. He used to famously make speeches about how we suffered and died in World War I and World War II for you. Like, here he is talking from beyond the grave, apparently. And his entire military career and history consists of being a cook at a training camp at Puckapunyal. He never left the country. The people who actually did a lot of shooting and being shot at had a low tolerance of the sort of person who made a big noise of himself in the arsehole club after the war. The whole idea of gathering together on ANZAC Day for a memorial service, it was a funeral service for the families and relatives of the 60,000 who volunteered to be shot and killed back when we only had 5 million in the country. 500,000 volunteered to go and play war games, and there was only 5 million here. Right, where 10% of Australia went to the First World War. Half of them were shot. Half of the ones that were shot died. It was a really big thing. So there was no marching at ANZAC Day services until the 1930s, when the fucking warmongers decided to use it as an enlistment recruiting drive. And that's when the Gallipoli veterans really got the shits. But they're all dead now, so when Robert E. Lee Hawke who used to be a Labor Party Prime Minister, the one who sent Australia to help America invade Iraq. Well, I can't say the first time, because Australia fought in Iraq in the Second World War. Australia fought in Iraq in the First World War. Australia won the Battle of Armageddon, Armageddon, the grand battle, the one the Bible talks about, happened in 1918 when Australia beat the shit out of the Ottoman Turkish Empire. That whole 140,000 horsemen, Beersheba cavalry charge, last actual cavalry charge that worked in the history of warfare, that was Australia. Yep. So I can't say Bob Hawke sent Australia to the first Iraq war, but it's the one we think of as the first one, the one to kick Iraq out of Kuwait, after Madeleine Albright assured Sad Man Who's Insane that the United States was not interested in internecine border disputes among Arab client states. That's what she said to him a week before he invaded Kuwait. He was given the green light to go and do it. Reason that happened, apparently, was because the fall of the Berlin Wall meant that there was this peace dividend, which meant the NATO military-industrial complex had ground to a halt and nobody was buying any weapons. So what they needed to do was shoot off the entire anti-Soviet stockpile, and they did that in the desert. Rubbed sand into all the tank engines, fucked it all up, Oh, we need to buy new guns, we need to buy new uniforms, new, more factory. Shot off all the cruise missiles, and bugger me, 10 years down the track, they wanted to do it again. So they did. Absurdistan, 12-year-long war. Iraq. We're going back in there for about the third time in 13 years, third time in 25 years at the moment. Week before the anniversary of the ANZAC Day invasion, Tony Abbott sends 350 Australians to go and sit, in a tent halfway between Baghdad and the ISIL front line. $200 million to celebrate ANZAC Day, 100th anniversary. Do you know there has been no official government-funded military history of the first Iraq war, the one that Bob Hawke sent us to, no official government military history of the second Iraq war, no military history of the 12-year occupation of Absurdistan, no military history of what the Australians did in the East Timor campaign, no official military history of what the Australians did pacifying and occupying the Solomon Islands, because nothing the Australian Defence Forces has done for the last 25 years has been considered worth writing a history of. It's all been completely fucking wasted effort because politicians said so. That's why we're spending $320 million to celebrate World War I. And Tony Abbott's over there, and he's got, fleets of school kids wearing the Australian flag as fucking shoulder capes. How much money have they spent on security? All because a 14-year-old English school kid rang up a couple of dickheads in Melbourne and talked about, how much fun it would be to conduct a sword attack on cops at Anzac Day. Thank God nobody actually attacked any Anzac Day services, so all the money spent on security was wasted because there was no attack. That's the way I look at it. Gives me the shits. Gives me the shits. It'll give diarrhea the shits, because I was raised to stand up and salute the flag and march in Anzac Day parades and stand there at the services and all the rest of it. So every time the bloody radio plays the last post, I get the emotional, nostalgic, traditional reaction, despite what I know about it. It's really, really bloody irritating. Yesterday, an FA-18 flew over the top of my place while lining up on the initial point to do a strafing run and buzz the Glen Innes Anzac Day service. Did a pretty good job, actually. Heard him hit his afterburners on the way back out. But I got to see him on the way in. And, even if you stay away from Anzac Day, you cop it. The whole bloody day. You can't escape it once you've been raised to think about it. And I'm afraid I was raised to think about it from an early age. They got me while I was young. But isn't it interesting that we have no recent history of the Australian military forces, lest we remember? That's why we're bedazzled, snowed, overwhelmed with stuff about World War I, when 6 million people agreed to shoot and kill each other because a Serbo-Croatian shot an Austro-Hungarian in a town called Sarajevo, and if it happened today, nobody would volunteer for Jack Diddley's shit. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.